Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon, Associate Professor, VSSG College, Kanpur. We are discussing Paper 3, 19th Century English Literature. This is Module 3, William Wordsworth, written by Dr. Sudhir Arora. William Wordsworth is not only a poet. William Wordsworth is a name that symbolizes Romanticism, that is an icon of Romantic poetry. Let's know about William Wordsworth. His birth, April 7, 1770 at Cockermouth, Cumberland. Death, April 23, 1850. Father, John Wordsworth. Mother, Anne Cookson. Wife, Mary Hutchinson. And the most important character in his life, his sister, Dorothy Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, he was the second of the 5 children of John Wordsworth and Anne Cookson, and when he was only 8 years old, his mother died. He joined St. John's College at the University of Cambridge in 1887, and that was a very important period of his life. There, William Taylor, he was his teacher who inspired him to compose poems. He had never been serious about his formal education, but he was a good student. There, in Orleans, he fell in love with Mary Ann Wallon, known as Annette. It is said that he had a daughter, Anne Caroline, from her, but he never confirmed it. The Lake District always inspired him, and with Coleridge and Robert Southey, he was named as a lake poet. When one talks of poetry, specifically the poetry of 19th century, the name of William Wordsworth, it flashes on the screen of your mind. And the publication of the Lyrical Ballads in 1798, it initiated the era of Romanticism as far as English literature is concerned. Now, various ingredients of Romanticism must be taken care of when you are going to study Wordsworth. The 19th century poetry, which bubbles with Romanticism, there are major characteristics like subjectivity, love of supernatural, imagination, emotion, love of nature, simplicity, spontaneity, and a revolt against artificiality, specifically in language. When we go through Wordsworth's poetry, we find that his poetry possesses all these characteristics of Romanticism, and that's why we call him a romantic poet. But when we deal with this particular question, why is Wordsworth a romantic poet? Why do we call him as a romantic poet? Is it justified? Then we can just consider certain points that Wordsworth, with his close friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he revolted against the pseudo-artificial diction of the 18th century, the neoclassical age, which was represented by Alexander Pope. He revolted against gaudiness and inane phraseology that was employed in 18th century poetry, also known as the Augustan age. In Wordsworth's poetry, nature was at the center. He didn't concentrate so much on society because individual was more important. Imagination made him a romantic poet of high order. Wordsworth gave more importance to feelings than thoughts. His adoption of various lyric forms, like he wrote odes, he wrote sonnets, and his use of blank verse, distance from conventional subjects, and manner became the solid bricks in constructing the structure of Romanticism in Wordsworth's poetry. Now, whenever we talk of Wordsworth, we cannot just avoid a brilliant work that is known as Lyrical Ballads. The publication of Lyrical Ballads marked the beginning of the Romantic movement. And Lyrical Ballads, it contained 23 poems. Out of these 23 poems, 19 were written by Wordsworth and rest 4 by Coleridge. Afterwards, just after 2 years, in 1800, he added the famous Preface to the Lyrical Ballads, and that was the second edition of the Lyrical Ballads. After that, in the third edition, written in 1802, he just wrote an appendix on poetic diction, and it was also added. To be noted, he penned more than 500 sonnets. Who can forget the word is too much? And many more. Now, let me quote significant lines from Preface to Lyrical Ballads, because after going through these lines, you will understand the importance of the Lyrical Ballads in a better way. I quote, "Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and it takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. Poetry is the breath and finer spirit of all knowledge. It is the impassioned expression which is in the countenance of all science." It is also said, "It may be safely affirmed that there neither is nor can be any essential difference between the language of prose and metrical composition." Unquote. Wordsworth's contribution towards 19th century literature is immense. Some of the important points related with his poetry and his contribution may be summed up like: his poetry has a soothing and restorative effect on the soul. He emerges as a teacher, and the didactic element is there in his poetry. His poetry offers a message of hope, determination, and persistence. His poetry recommends the ideal of simple living and high thinking. His nature poetry is more needed in the present scenario than ever. Let us realize the importance of nature, because Wordsworth reminded us, let nature be your teacher. Nature is the guide, guardian, and soul. We all know how Wordsworth defined poetry. He just expressed his conception that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. But let us also know how and what critics say about Wordsworth. I quote De Quincey, who said, "Wordsworth had his passion for nature fixed in his blood." J.C. Smith said, "Wordsworth is a mountain, the most massive in that lofty range which is called the Romantic Revival." In this module, we are discussing some major works by Wordsworth. The first is the Prelude, Book 1. You must know what is the Prelude, what it is about, how it was written, what was the aim. So first thing, that it is the most revealing and personal poem written in blank verse. Wordsworth started composing it in 1799 and continued to pen it throughout his life. It was published in 1850 after Wordsworth's death. The title The Prelude was not given by Wordsworth, it was given by his wife. The Prelude has been divided into 14 books, fused with the spirit of the Romanticism. It is known as growth of a poet's mind. Why? Because in Prelude, Wordsworth just concentrates more what is going on inside and not what is going on outside. It is better known as the poetical autobiography, which explores the poet's soul progress through the self-discovery. It is the autobiography of the poet because poet narrates what he feels, poet narrates his experiences, poet narrates what he wanted to convey. Prelude records happy early childhood, troubles faced in the later childhood, the visionary experience as a child, education at Hogshead and at Cambridge, love and illusion for the French Revolution, a spiritual crisis, mental balance, and overall his faith in humanity. The Prelude undoubtedly places before us Wordsworth the revolutionary, Wordsworth the man, Wordsworth the poet, and finally Wordsworth the high priest of nature. It was said by Herbert Reed. Now we are concentrating on Prelude Book 1. In the autumn of 1795, Wordsworth feels happy when he leaves London and he feels a soothing personality in the breeze. He recalls his friend Coleridge, who encouraged him to compose a philosophical poem, The Recluse. He is well equipped with primary gifts received from nature like forms and image also in addition. He is confident that he will be able to create a great work of art. He finds themes in abundance, but none of them strikes him to be a suitable choice. The Prelude, though, possesses epical characteristics, but you cannot call it an epic in the traditional sense, like Miltonic epic. It is different. It does not focus on the outward happenings in the life of the poet, but it throws light on the growth that occurs within his mind. Somehow, nature teaches that there is an essential unity in all the objects. Now, there is a very interesting episode in the Prelude mentioned by Wordsworth that is known as boating episode. I'll just tell you in brief the story of the boating episode. Like the poet recalls the boating episode, which for him was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure, to show how nature fosters the poet's soul through fear also. You understand that Wordsworth always told that nature is the guardian of your soul. A guardian not only loves but creates fear also whenever required. In this boating episode, Wordsworth is expressing that nature creates fear as well. One summer evening, he unties the chain of a little boat and pushes it away from the shore without taking the permission of its owner. So, he felt that it is an act of theft. While moving, he hears echoes from the mountain sides. To his wonder, he sees a huge and black peak which seems to rear its head like a living being. That was creating fear in Wordsworth, as if it was telling that you have done a wrong thing by this theft. Though he continues to row over the calm lake, he feels the presence of the awful peak wherever he went. That simple peak but it was looking as if it was in the shape of a creature that follows him with some design. Hence, he felt, and he turns the boat back and left it at the place from where he stole, and moves towards home, feeling that nature has created fear. Why? To give him a lesson, to differentiate between right and wrong. So that is an important lesson. Wordsworth sees the flashes of vision of divine beauty, even in the midst of sensuous pleasures. He addresses Coleridge in an apologetic mood and asks him to forgive him if he finds his story tedious. He believes that if genial mood does not desert him, he will trace out the story of his life. Now, I will like to give you some excerpts from the Prelude, Book 1. Feel the writer, experience his words, and try to understand how meaningful they are. I quote, "Fair seed time had my soul, and I grew up, fostered alike by beauty and by fear. Dust as we are, the immortal spirit grows. Like harmony in music, there is a dark, inscrutable workmanship that reconciles discordant elements, makes them cling together in one society." I unquote. Now you can see the style of the Prelude. The Prelude demonstrates Wordsworth's sincerity in feeling and expression. The style is simple and lucid, and the poet has avoided the use of far-fetched imagery or conceit or rhetorical devices. He has taken his images and figures from the world of nature. Like in the boating episode, you had seen there is no one who is guarding him against this, only a rock. For Bateson, this poem can only be called subjective autobiography. It is written, as it were, from the inside outwards. Another poem, very important poem, that is known as Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. It is an ode. Whenever we consider Wordsworth, people call there are two Wordsworths. One who is so simple, one who always talks in the language of man. But after going through this poem, you will come to know there are two Wordsworths. This Wordsworth is not that simple. This Wordsworth is not talking in a common layman's language. He began it in early 1802 and completed it in 1806 and got it published in 1807. It was in 2 volumes. In the first 4 stanzas, the poet raises questions. He puts this question regarding the loss of celestial light. And in the consequent stanzas, he answers to these questions in the form of compensation of the philosophical mind. Now, when Wordsworth talks about this particular childhood, innocence, there he is infusing all the characteristics of the Romanticism. Emerson calls this poem the high watermark of poetry in the 19th century. And the subject matter of the poem is the immortality of soul, the soul of which a human being is aware in his childhood, but begins to forget as he grows up. Wordsworth again and again emphasizes on this particular point that the innocent child is not only a child who does not know anything. Rather, he glorifies this childhood. The poet recalls the time when meadow, grove, stream, the earth, and even common sights seem to be clothed in celestial light. He fails to see the celestial light which he used to see when he was a child. As a child, you experience nature in all its bounty. You can see the divine spark in the nature. But when you grow up, then the society corrupts you. Then you cannot see that this childhood, this innocence is there in all its purer form. He explains the laws of celestial light with the help of the doctrine of reminiscence. He explains that when you grow up, that innocence has been taken place by philosophical thoughts. He says, we come from heaven, but as soon as we come, we begin to forget our home from where we come. We forget God, we forget heaven, we forget our divine home. We think we have come to earth and we are going to live here forever. Earth plays the role of a foster mother who makes man forget his real home, heaven, by providing various delights and pleasures. The poet presents the picture of the child who attempts to imitate the actions of his elders. The poet presents the child that knows certain truths which remain unknown to the grown people because they are more involved in materialism. They tend to forget the divine element. They tend to forget what was essential, what was there in their heavenly abode. That is why the poet calls the child a philosopher. An eye among the blind. Who is blind? The grown-up person. And the eye, who is that eye? The child. A mighty prophet, a seer. That is too high. But here, why Wordsworth is giving all these titles and adjectives? Because he wants to glorify the child. He wants that this childlike innocence should remain with us in our mature years also. The poet has faith in life after death. He talks about heaven as the pre-home and the final destination where you will go after this earth. Even the meanest flower can provide him such deep thoughts that even tears fail to express. That is the height that he talks about nature and its effect. Now we feel that intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood as a ode is the most celebrated, as well as the most controversial. Why controversial? Because when Wordsworth presents child as the father of man, then there are certain issues to be discussed. To consider a child the best philosopher, seer blessed, an eye among the blind is too much. Critics, they just create objections. It gives a sudden jerk after the first 5 stanzas. It fails to continue its unity, which comes to an end due to too much emphasis on the idea of pre-existence. Now, this is called Wordsworth's limitation as a poet. It is not a poem for common reader or a common man. It does not follow the parameters of simple diction. So here, 2 Wordsworths, the second Wordsworth appears in front of you. Now I will like to quote some meaningful excerpts from the ode. I quote, he says, "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Mighty prophet, seer blessed, on whom those truths do rest, which we are toiling all our lives to find." Now see what Wordsworth says, that the child when he takes birth, he knows everything. He is a mighty prophet. And after spending years and years, what you want to become? A mighty prophet. You work so hard to become a philosopher, while a child knows all those truths which you are toiling hard to know. So that is the way how he is glorifying the childhood. Now many other poems are there which will give you the proofs that Wordsworth should be regarded as a true romantic poet. The poet had vague perception that there was a world of spirit beyond this physical world. He used to have that instinct which remained above human nature. He talks about all those things in the poems like Solitary Reaper. That is a beautiful poem. Solitary Reaper. Whosoever has gone through Wordsworth loves him because of such poems. The poem Solitary Reaper goes like this. Behold her, single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grains and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. Let me explain these lines to you. What Wordsworth says. Who is this solitary reaper? A girl who is solitary, who is lonely, without any companion. And she is reaper. She is reaping there in the field all alone. There she is singing a song. Wordsworth is so enchanted by this song. He stops and says, everybody, behold her. See her. She is single. There is no companion. Reaping and singing by herself. Now when he says that she is reaping and singing, he wants to just share that she is just enjoying her work. She is singing the song. And he says, stop here to listen that, or simply pass, gently pass. Don't disturb her. Otherwise, her song will be disturbed. Alone she cuts. There is no helping hand, and binds the grain and sings a melancholy strain. Now the point to be noted over here is Wordsworth cannot understand the language. Even then he can feel that this song is melancholic. This is sad. It is not a happy song. And he says that it is overflowing with the sound. He can understand the sound but not the meaning. Then he says, no nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands. What he meant that the song was very, very sweet. He could not understand the words, he could not understand the language, but he could understand the melody. He could understand the meaning in a different level, meaning which his soul can understand. And that's why he compares her with the nightingale, the singing bird. And he says that the person who is going through that area is, if he is weary, then that song will help him, console him. Of travelers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands, a voice so thrilling never was heard. He's praising in all his humility, he's praising and says a voice so thrilling never was heard in a spring triumph from the cuckoo bird. Breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest hybrids. And then he puts a very important question. Will no one tell me what she sings? Now he is so enchanted with the song. He wants to know what she is singing, what are the words, what she wants to convey through this melancholic song. Is she weary? Is she troubled? How she is singing, what she is singing, and he wants someone to come. In this image, you can see that a solitary reaper, a girl, is just reaping. Poet draws on rustic life. This girl is a rustic girl. She's a common girl. You see the theme of lasting effect of natural surrounding. You see the theme of loneliness. You see the theme of isolation from the world and its matters. You feel the role of memory. You find the power of recollection. You feel nature. nature as a source of peace and happiness, and it is all written in very simple language. So it is sufficient to just establish Wordsworth as a romantic poet, because these are the qualities of Romanticism which he is inheriting and representing through this poem. Now, she was probably singing in a Scot which was not known to Wordsworth, and what he appreciates is its tone, its expressive beauty, and the mood it creates within him, rather than its explicit content, at which he can only make a wild guess. As far as its meter is concerned, it is written in tight iambic tetrameter. Each follows a rhyme scheme of AB, AB, CC, DD. Though in the first and the last stanza, the A rhyme is off. By placing this praise and this beauty in a rustic, natural setting, and by establishing its source as a simple rustic girl, Wordsworth is just establishing the values of lyrical ballads in all practicality. The rules that he has written in lyrical ballads, he is following them in his poems. Another important poem is Tintern Abbey. Without discussing Tintern Abbey, you cannot justify to understand Wordsworth as a poet in the real sense. This poem is very important because it gives you the 4 stages of William Wordsworth as a nature poet. It starts like this: 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs. It's a beautiful poem. Wordsworth tells us that he is experiencing nature not only at present, but it is giving him food for thought for his future years as well. I quote, "While here I stand not only with the sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years." Again, he gives a very beautiful simile when he says, "When like a roe I bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams wherever nature led." So Wordsworth tells you that first he experienced nature as a child, just the outward beauty, the colors. Next, he just experienced a meaning in nature. After that, he could understand the philosophical message of nature, and the final stage of pantheism, where the God, nature and the man becomes one, is there. So he says, "Well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral beings." To sum up, I will say that Wordsworth's lyrical ballads initiated the era of Romanticism. It was important because it presented him as a man and presented the growth of poet's mind. Intimations of immortality of ode presented his genuine side, his scholarship, and the poems like Solitary Reaper, Tintern Abbey presented the 4 stages of his love for nature. So enjoy Wordsworth, and you, for another thing, you can go and just consult the text. I will just conclude with a few lines. "I wandered lonely as a cloud" by William Wordsworth. "Or oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils." Love nature, love Wordsworth. Thank you.